nearby. And our alarm beeped briefly, so if I disappear, it's the thunder and lightning.
Okay, Douglas, you are live.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. All right, I would like to call this meeting to order. It is currently 4:37 p.m. on Thursday, July 18th. Before we get started, we would like to give a quick land acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. That out of the way, we'd like to give a quick roll call. The chair of this committee is Hugh Millward. We believe he's currently experiencing some technical difficulties, but is on his way into the call right now. Myself is Douglas Wetmore, vice chair of the committee, sitting in for Hugh's behalf. Councillor Patty Cuddle, are you currently in the call?
I am currently in the call.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Peter Zimmer.
Here, present.
Perfect. Holly Woodill.
Present for the moment, yes.
Present pending thunderstorms. Paul Young.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Paul. Annika Riopel.
Yep, hi.
Fantastic. Milena Kazanavicius.
Right here, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Milena. Miles McCormick.
Present.
Perfect. Elizabeth Pugh.
I am here.
Perfect. And Glenn Babcock. Glenn joined the call yet? I don't see their name in the list, so they're currently absent or on their way. We've received regrets from Brittany McLean for tonight. And then joining us from staff are David McIsaac.
Hey.
Yep, there's David. Siobhan Witherby.
Hey, it's Siobhan. I'm here.
Siobhan, sorry about that.
Okay, no worries.
Laura Lewis.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
And Olawumi. I apologize, I'm not going to get the last name right here. Odeyinka Apantaku.
Krista Vining. Allow me is just assisting Hugh, but she is in the meeting,
Okay,
and
perfect.
I'm here as well, providing support.
Thank you, Krista. All right. Roll call aside, we will move on to item number 2, approval of the minutes from our June 20th meeting. Is there any errors or omissions that the committee would like to put forward? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the minutes. This requires a mover and a seconder.
All Young will move.
Thank you,
Milena
Paul.
will second.
And then we'll second. All right. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
And any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, so that passes. Item 3, approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Are there any additions or deletions from the clerk's office?
Yes, we have an addition to the item, and that's the added item 10.1.
And that would be the Almond Street cycling infrastructure conversation?
Yes.
All right, perfect. And we don't require a motion to approve that, do we? That's just been added?
We'll need a motion because that will affect the agenda, so the agenda will have to be amended for that. So there
Okay.
will be a mover and a seconder
So
for
we
that.
will require a mover and a seconder.
Yes.
Would
I can
anyone-
move.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Annika.
I'll second
And-
it. Holly
And
will
Holly
second.
seconds that. All right. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. And any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, so that passes and has been added as item 10.1. Are there any other additions or deletions submitted by the committee? Hearing none, so we will move on to item 4, business arising out of the minutes. I believe there are none, correct? Yep, I see some nods. Moving on to item 5, call for declaration of conflicts of interest. I'd like to ask the committee now if they have any conflict to declare as a result of an agenda item tonight. Hearing none, so we will move on to item 6, consideration of deferred business. I believe that is none as well. All right. And moving on to item 7, correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Has there been any correspondence received by the clerk's office?
Yes, correspondence was received by the clerk's office for item 10.1 and it was circulated to members.
Perfect. And that was circulated, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Were there any petitions received by the clerk's office?
Yes, the clerk's office received a petition from Maggie Bernard regarding the Cobboard Road narrowing construction project with approximately 43 signatures. The signatures rather is requesting the construction be paused to review the plan with Wagwi neighbors, the residents, the Amber Academy, and the synagogue.
I see Hugh Millward has joined the call.
Yes, hello. Sorry for joining late. I had an inexplicable problem. I couldn't get in with the passcode.
No
here
worries
I
at
am.
all.
Here I am.
Yeah, we've just made it to item 7.2. So would you like me to pass the roll back to you?
Yes, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so are we moving on to 7.3 right now?
I have a question about the petition.
Okay, go ahead.
How many signatures was that? 3 or 30?
43 signatures.
3. Okay. That answers your question? Okay. Then we move on to 8 information items brought forward, and there are none. And then we move on to reports and discussion, and we have item 9.1.1, update on Portland Street functional planning project. And I invite Siobhan Witherby, project manager, transportation planning, to make the presentation.
Thank you so much, Hugh and committee, for inviting us to present to you this evening about the Portland Street Cole Harbour Road functional planning project. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. Are you able to see this?
Yes.
Okay.
It's blank
Wonderful.
right now.
Okay. Right now I'm casting the presentation. It should be the main presentation up. Is it still blank?
I can see it.
I can see it.
Okay. That's wonderful. Thank you again. So my name is Siobhan
Okay,
Witherby. I'm the
Go ahead.
project manager in charge of this project. I'm also joined by my colleagues Adam Lanigan and Hongnan Sun, who are on the call. We didn't get to them in the roll call, but they'll be helping in providing some commentary about the project and taking notes so that they can be reflected in our What We Heard report for this project. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to ATAC about this project. It is very exciting for Dartmouth and Cole Harbour, and has a lot of active transportation components to it. So to get your feedback will be really important. So thank you very much. Here is a quick agenda. I'm going to try and run through this. It's a complicated corridor. There's a lot of different components. I'm going to try and get to it in 25-30 minutes. But first I'll talk about the project context and design objectives. I'll take you through some history. It's been around for a few years and some of the timelines associated with that, talk about some of our new analysis methodologies, and then finally introduce some of the concept design options that we're proposing for each segment alongside their associated trade-offs. Lastly, I'll talk about the project schedule and next steps for this functional planning project and have some specific discussion questions for the committee.
Okay, if I can interrupt,
Yes.
Siobhan, we did some time back have a presentation about this, so you may wish to rush through the first parts of it with the history and timelines. Okay.
Certainly. Yep. No, that is great. So I believe this project was at ATAC in April of 2021. I'll hit some of the highlights of the project extent, but I won't get into it too much and focus on kind of the newer material just for the sake of time in this committee. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, Hugh. So this first slide that I have on screen shows the project extent of the functional planning project. The Portland Street corridor is 7 kilometers, spanning between Alderney and Prince Albert intersection all the way out to Bissett Road. So it is a very long corridor, important for multimodal transportation in the communities of Dartmouth and Cole Harbour. I've broken it in this image into a few segments based on changing land use. So the first segment, segment 1 from Alderney to Gaston, and then the second from Gaston to Portland Hills Terminal, and the third from Portland Hills Terminal to Bissett. I've put some images on the screen here. So here is an aerial view of the first segment between Alderney and Gaston. It's our most narrow right-of-way. We have 1 vehicle travel lane in each direction. We've got nice mature street tree boulevards, sidewalk on each side, and historic homes located close to the back of the sidewalk. There's currently no bicycling infrastructure and just standard conventional transit service through this section. The next aerial image is of the Highway 111, the circumferential highway overpass. You can see the overpass as an important piece of provincial infrastructure. It's where a lot of people who are moving along the corridor are kind of using the corridor to access the highway. You can also see a view of the next section of Portland Street, which is a little bit wider. So we get about 2 lanes in each direction for vehicles. There are a few locations with a short transit queue jump, but overall no dedicated transit infrastructure. We've got a very narrow sidewalk that crosses the Highway 111 overpass and no dedicated cycling facilities. This is seen as quite the barrier in terms of active transportation in linking between these 2 communities. You can also see some of the surrounding land use, which is the low density commercial parking lots, gas stations, car dealerships, and potential opportunity to grow and expand in the future. I'll skip through this one to our last segment, which is Cole Harbour Road. It is a similar 4-lane cross section, 2 in each direction. There aren't any dedicated transit facilities. We've got sidewalks and a narrow grassy boulevard, not too many street trees alongside the road here, and then more of a village feel to the commercial alongside it. We still have the parking lots and lower density commercial fronting it, just on a bit of a less intensive scale. The committee is probably quite familiar with some of our guiding policy that informs this functional planning project. So the integrated mobility plan is all about managing congestion through providing transportation options for people to get around using all sorts of different modes. There's also mode share targets that are set out in the IMP for moving away from our reliance on single occupancy vehicles towards more sustainable transportation modes. Next, we have the rapid transit strategy, which includes the bus rapid transit red line on Portland Street, spanning from Alderney out to Portland Hills Terminal. So this project will really look at how we achieve that bus rapid transit, a frequent, reliable all-day system to help move people more efficiently on transit. We've got the AT priorities plan, which includes building a connected network of all age and abilities facilities for walking, rolling, and cycling. That's particularly within the regional center, but within these suburban areas, it's all about connecting people into this AAA network. And that is something we can look at for the Portland Street Cole Harbour Road corridor. There are some sections of the corridor that are included in the AT priorities plan as having cycling infrastructure to be determined, but not the entire corridor. But that's something that we wanted to investigate through this project. Also, the strategic road safety plan, which includes things like corridor-wide speed management to help mitigate or reduce the injury severity of crashes if they do happen. And then the Halifax climate action strategy, all about decarbonizing transportation and helping to meet our IMP mode share targets. So some of the design objectives of this project, it's primarily to determine how best to implement BRT service along this corridor. We also want to enhance the pedestrian realm and incorporate connected cycling infrastructure as much as possible. Overall, it is about improving the people moving efficiency of how we best use the cross section and use the available space to help people get to where they want to go and address our future mobility demands. So we're not just basing this off of how people move now, we're projecting into the future to make sure that it meets our needs moving forward. As most projects, we want to apply a complete streets lens to our decision making and help to build up a mixed commercial and residential main street as a potential feature of this corridor, and basing all of our recommendations on best practices for road safety and addressing areas of previous collisions. Any questions before I move forward? I can't see anybody.
Sorry, we'll take the questions at the end if
at the end.
Okay. Yeah.
Certainly. So some of the challenges along the corridor, I've talked about limited right-of-way. In some sections, we only have 9 meters to work with. We've got beautiful big street trees immediately on either side of the curb. So managing how we manage that in the section in blue on the left there from Alderney to Gaston. I've highlighted in red the Highway 111 crossing in that it is high volume. It's missing some pedestrian infrastructure. We've got peak hour congestion on Portland Street between Portland Baker Woodlawn and Spring Avenue, also down into Cole Harbour. So managing sort of how we deal with that congestion, and also in the summertime now, folks coming and going from Rainbow Haven Beach at the Bissett Street intersection, there is some congestion of making left-hand turns out there. So we're wondering through this project, how can we best achieve transit priority? We're balancing building a kind of smaller livable street versus the peak hour convenience of fitting as many people through this corridor who need to move at AM and PM rush hours. That number grows significantly. How do we best manage that? Also looking at surrounding land uses. How do we get bus rapid transit supportive density alongside this project? And are there opportunities to incorporate cycling as well? Although it's not in some of the AT plan necessarily, we've heard through talking with people internally and externally that a continuous route along this corridor would be an ideal. Some of this conversation about adding additional infrastructure could require some property acquisition. So in some areas of the corridor, that is easier than others. Within this image, it's a shot of Portland Street with a wide swath of red land or wide red swath on one side, showing where we might want to or might need to acquire property through some of these proposed scenarios. In this section, it just shows a section of parking lot that would be potentially acquired from some adjacent properties. But in other sections of the corridor where it is a bit narrower, we might have challenges acquiring initial property without impacting buildings. So timeline, Hugh talked about how ATAC has talked about this project in the past. So the Portland Street Cole Harbour Road Functional Planning Project was initiated in fall of 2020. There was some existing conditions analysis and stakeholder engagement that took place in spring of 2021. So that would have been the first ATAC conversation. A What We Heard report was produced, which is available online, and we started to do some early concept work. But that first round of public engagement, we had a virtual open house. This was in 2021, so all things were virtual, and also an online survey. It was really promising at that time, realizing that around 40% of participants said that they would shift their trip if dedicated bus lanes were installed, or they would consider changing some of their travel behavior. 60% of respondents would consider shifting towards more walking and rolling if an improved pedestrian realm and crosswalks were installed. And around 30% said that they would consider cycling if we provided a protected facility separated from traffic. So there is a lot of kind of latent demand for these additional modes that just hasn't been captured along the street that's so much focused on vehicles right now. So we took that. The project sat idle for a few years based on some changing staff priorities, but in the past year, they've hired me as a project manager to oversee the completion of the project. We reinitiated the contract with WSP. We had to do some additional data collection to see how things were functioning in our 2023 scenario now with hybrid work post, in quotations, COVID. And base all of our analysis and decision making off of the latest and greatest data. We did some concept work based on what we found, and then just in June last month, we hosted our phase 2 of public and stakeholder engagement. So we hosted 2 open house sessions and an online survey. We've engaged close to 1,200 people. There we go. Between all of those sessions, and we're adding more this evening, so thank you for your time. In looking forward to this functional plan, we want to be sure that we're planning for the future and making infrastructure decisions based on the HRM 1 million scenario. With all of the significant growth that the municipality has been seeing, if we continue on that trajectory, we could hit HRM 1 million in about 25 to 30 years. So when we were looking at our corridor moving capacity and some of the design scenarios for Portland Street, we incorporated the demand that would be generated from this HRM 1 million scenario. Another new methodology that we incorporated is looking at the people moving capacity. So previously, a lot of our transportation planning and decision making has been based on the number of vehicle trips only and how things function for cars and delay and intersection function for vehicles. So we're really trying to pivot that from vehicle trips to people trips, understanding that people could choose a range of options if they are provided to them. This is used in other cities across North America when they're looking at how to repurpose their arterial corridors and how to best measure kind of the success and people moving efficiency of those corridors. So we used some of the best practices data online and from other cities in this, combined with some HRM specific observations to come up with these numbers. There's a graph on the right that shows the number of people per hour per lane that can be carried using each of the modes. So first is a vehicle only lane. For the Halifax context, we estimate that to be around 1,200 people per hour per lane. If you run frequent buses in that lane, you could carry up to 2,400 people per hour per lane. Contrasting that with a dedicated transit lane, we estimate to be able to carry 4,800 people per hour per lane. So the story of that is it's 4 times as efficient as a vehicle lane and about 2 times as efficient as a lane with frequent buses. We also had some estimates for how many people per hour per lane could be carried in a dedicated transit facility. So that's 2,400 per direction. There was quite the range in estimates in the research on that. Also in for a pedestrian sidewalk, the estimate is around 6,000 people per hour per sidewalk. So we wanted to use this way of thinking about people moving capacity, our sort of potential for how we move people as a way to inform these designs. So here's us applying some of this people moving capacity. You can see based on these existing cross sections that we can move around 4,800 people per hour in a 2-lane cross section. That's not including the sidewalks, and 7,200 people per hour not including the sidewalks, with our 4-lane cross section that assumes an inside lane that is mostly vehicles and an outside lane that is mixed traffic with transit in it. We considered including the extra 12,000 people that would be moved on the sidewalks, but I don't know if that's our solution necessarily to meeting travel demand out in Dartmouth and Cole Harbour, putting everyone onto the sidewalks. So we're kind of taking that with a grain of salt and kind of focusing on some of those vehicle and transit and bicycle lanes as our primary way to look at sort of our demand number and how the cross section best meets that. So we really wanted to use this to see, do our scenario assumptions meet our projected mobility demand, and what are the mode shares required to move people based on those scenarios. I'll talk a bit about our concept design. So the first from Alderney to Gaston, we've split it into 2 scenarios. So the first scenario includes queue jump lanes at intersections only. And the second scenario includes continuous inbound transit lane. Both of these options include opportunity to incorporate wider sidewalks, tree boulevards, and unfortunately, we were unable to find a way to fit both transit and enhanced cycling infrastructure through this very narrow section. So we do have an alternative cycling route proposed from Maynard Lake to Shuby Greenway Star Park, which I will show on a map in a moment. So first is this scenario 1, the queue jump lanes. This is kind of a lower impact solution that helps transit to get through the intersections where most of the congestion occurs. So the transit vehicles would proceed in the outside lane, the right-hand lane. It would be signed right-hand turn except buses, with a receiving lane on the far side of the intersection so that they could proceed on green alongside the through vehicles before merging back in with cars. This requires a small amount of property acquisition around the intersections only, but the mid-block treatment would remain largely the same. On the side where we do need to widen for the queue jump, we would be shifting the sidewalk slightly with a grass boulevard and an opportunity to install probably a 1.8 sidewalk for accessibility, but it would bend out slightly in order to accommodate the queue jump lane. I'm switching to a slide with the cross section that shows at the intersections we would have the pedestrians crossing 4 lanes, 4 lanes of traffic, and then the mid-block treatment is on the right-hand side that shows just the existing cross section with 2 wide vehicle lanes. One thing to consider about this is property. In this section of Alderney to Gaston, there are homes located quite close to the back of the sidewalk. So this queue jump option could be a way to help us balance some of that and achieve transit priority around the intersections without impacting as much of the adjacent property and boulevards. For the short section, probably about 60 or 70 meters of the intersection, we would be disturbing the boulevard and potentially acquiring a strip of property from the adjacent homeowners. This scenario 2 includes a continuous inbound transit lane. This was included in the rapid transit strategy as inbound transit lane. It's a way to help get people into downtown quickly and reliably. If it takes it one step up in priority from these queue jump lanes, so that the inbound buses are traveling in a dedicated right of way, but the impact is that it does require more property on the north side of the intersection. For the outbound direction, we would maintain the queue jump lanes at intersections, and then the buses would proceed in mixed traffic, a single lane for the remainder of the corridor. This is a cross section on the screen here that shows what it could look like. So we've got our westbound, our inbound transit lane with a westbound inbound lane for vehicles and a single lane outbound for cars. We've got our sidewalk on each side. In trying to manage some of the property impacts alongside this option, we would be holding what is hopefully the south side curb and trying not to touch any of that side, and we would be widening on the north only so that we can try and manage some of those impacts. Street trees have been noted as being significant to the area, especially where there is a proposed heritage conservation district. Having that tree canopy is significant and connected to the heritage character of the area. So we would need to be sensitive about this if we are touching that north side curb only. Unfortunately, the trees that are located alongside that north side would need to be removed. We would be shifting the sidewalk slightly to the north, reestablishing a new tree boulevard and planting new trees, which would have an opportunity to grow and thrive, but it would take a few years for the trees to get back to that same feeling of kind of the 100-year-old beautiful canopy that we have today. So that's playing the long game a little bit. This option also impacts a significant amount of properties along that north side. I mentioned the proposed heritage conservation district, so that is on the left-hand side of our screen. It shows the boundaries in this map pretty much from the Portland Pleasant intersection all the way up to the Maynard Street intersection. And there's a little offshoot down Albert, but that has been proposed, but it hasn't been approved yet. It's to be called the Five Corners Heritage Conservation District. That'll be discussed by council probably in the next 5 to 10 years. So factoring that into our evaluation of these options. On the right-hand side of the screen here, this is where we show the alternative cycling route. So where this project is successful in providing 6 kilometers of protected, separated cycling route between Lakefront Road and Bissett Road, due to the narrowness of this intersection of Portland Street, we've proposed an alternative route that puts the bikes in through Maynard Lake Park, formalizes an existing footpath that goes along the edge of the lake, and then bends in to use a series of local streets to make that connection through to the Shubenacadie Canal Greenway, using a combination of Summit Street, Erskine Street, maybe a little bit of Pleasant Street, maybe a little bit of Eden Street, to make that connection over to the Shubenacadie Canal Greenway, or an alternative route using Old Ferry Road down to meet the Dartmouth Harbourfront Greenway. So it could join in a few different ways. One thing that we do acknowledge is that there is a very steep block of Erskine Street right before it hits Hawthorne that could pose a challenge for accessibility in terms of calling it an all ages and abilities cycling route. That unfortunately is a trade-off that we've had to contend with in terms of trying to maximize the transit priority along Portland Street and achieve that BRT red line. It works okay for the inbound, the westbound direction. You can roll down the hill, but for folks who are coming back to Dartmouth and Cole Harbour Road, proceeding eastbound, there is one block of very steep hill. So on an e-bike, you are able to get up. If you are super fit on an acoustic bike, you're probably able to get up, but I would say the largest amount of people would probably choose to dismount, and if they are able, and walk their bike up that particular block of Erskine. One thing that has been proposed to help manage that steepness issue for the particular block is the Trondheim bicycle lift, if anyone is familiar with that, as a way to kind of place your foot on a pedal and help you to propel up the hill, as something that could be considered potentially in the future to overcome that. And the routes shown on screen would be subject to further analysis through functional planning at a later stage. From Lakefront all the way down, this is Prince Arthur Avenue, we're able to achieve a protected, separated cycling facility in addition to wide sidewalks and protected bike lanes. This is where it starts to widen out. You can see on screen the red lanes are where it is dedicated for transit. So we get an inbound and an outbound dedicated transit lane. We have the light green, which is a protected bikeway. At this point in time, it would be concentrated to be a bidirectional bikeway on the north side of Portland Street alongside a sidewalk. We are hoping for either a grade separation, so like the half height sidewalk bike lane separation, or if we're able to acquire a bit more property, we could put some grassy buffer in between. But this continues all the way out to the next section, which is Gaston to Eisner. So with scenario 1, we show the Highway 111 overpass with signals and some restriping around the Portland Baker Woodlawn intersection. Scenario 2 shows an overpass with a new treatment, which is a roundabout at Woodlawn and Aythorpe. As part of this scenario, a major component is a separated active transportation bridge over Highway 111, which I will show you in this next section. Here is a map of what that concept scenario could look like. So the pedestrians and bicycles, for the most part, are still concentrated on the north side as it goes by Penhorn. You can access Penhorn Transit Terminal. You can access some of the multi-use pathways going into the Penhorn development, as well as in behind Penhorn Lake. Connectivity to that. Then there are a few switchbacks to help get a grade structure over top of the Highway 111, a few switchbacks on the way down. And then from Portland Baker Woodlawn, it would transition into a unidirectional facility with bikes proceeding on one side, one direction on each side of the intersection. Notably, this links up with the Dartmouth East project, which includes connectivity and protected facilities on Woodlawn, kind of going up into that neighborhood, Valleyfield, and beyond. So we'll be hooking into that, as well as incorporating a new multi-use pathway on the east side of Baker Drive to connect down into the Russell Lake Trails system. So the active transportation treatment doesn't shift as much between these two scenarios. There are some changes included on the Highway 111 overpass in terms of the vehicle lanes and the transit. We can get into those if people have questions at the end, but I'm going to focus on the active transportation for the purposes of this committee. Here's the second view. So similarly, the bikes and peds are on the north side. We would have some short sections of sidewalk on the south side as that side does develop, and crosswalks to help people get across and access to the Penhorn terminal. There wouldn't be a facility on the south side of the overpass until you get to Portland Baker Woodlawn intersection, in which case the south side sidewalk would pick up and continue. You can see in this image, once you get over the overpass, you're still on the north-hand side, but with this this Woodlawn Aythorpe roundabout, the route would take you a little bit farther to the north, and then you would need to cross two legs of the roundabout before hooking back down a multi-use pathway on the east side of Woodlawn to be able to get back to the primary travel corridor. So there is a bit of a diversion to be able to make that change. This scenario was proposed to try to mitigate delay issues at the Portland Baker Woodlawn intersection. Right now, the signal phase is really long and it causes a lot of congestion, and it would cause congestion for both vehicles and transit. So this is meant to try and take away the left-hand turns and allow for more green time on the transit corridor for Portland Street. We performed an evaluation about how each of these scenarios perform for the various modes. I'm not going to get into it in depth. You can refer to this information online, but you can see that the scenario 1 option performs better for people walking, rolling, and cycling. It's given kind of a light green, a better score, versus scenario 2. It's given a yellow, a good score, and that's just based on kind of the crossings that are required for the Woodlawn Aythorpe roundabout and the additional travel distance. The next section is from Eisner to Portland Hills Terminal. This is sort of the big meat of it, our philosophical discussion about how do we best provide transit priority along here. We have the option scenario 1 of reallocating our existing right-of-way, working within the existing cross section, and just marking the existing curb lanes dedicated for transit only. And then our scenario 2 would be expanding the right-of-way. We would need to buy additional property on one or both sides to establish new dedicated dedicated transit lanes on the outside, and maintain 2 through vehicle lanes for cars. Where we are making changes to the right-of-way, we would have opportunities to provide wide tree boulevards, wide accessible sidewalks, protected unidirectional facilities on each side, and looking for opportunities for additional pedestrian crossings to improve how people can walk and roll around their community and break up some of those larger block sizes. So this is an image of scenario 1, what it would look like if we reallocated the existing right-of-way. So there's only 1 lane for vehicles in each direction. We maintain the center 2-way turn lane, reversing turn lane that exists there today, and kind of work with the existing signalized intersections. We would hook into proposed facilities on Eisner. We've shown a potential future multi-use pathway on the east side of the street. That would be kind of subject to future study, but we want to acknowledge that it would all connect in. As a sub option of this scenario 1, we've also looked at what would happen if we added 2-lane roundabouts at each of the signalized intersections. And some of the inspiration we were drawing from for that would be the roundabouts that were provided on North Park Street in Halifax, at Kennard, and at Cogswell. Those seem to function fairly well and were supported by the community. And looking at roundabouts was a potential way to help move cars and buses faster without the need to stop necessarily and wait for the green time at the signalized intersection. However, we wanted to kind of contrast what that looks like, keeping the signals versus roundabouts. There are trade-offs associated with the roundabout in terms of the crossing priority. The sidewalk and the unidirectional bikeway would have to bend out a little bit farther and cross the leg of the roundabout in 2 stages. Right now, as it stands in the Motor Vehicle Act, a bicycle cannot get priority at this type of yield style crossing, even if we do an RRFB. There are still issues with if there were to be a collision, what the right-of-way could look like. So with a future lens that could be adjusted, and maybe we will have that fixed or written within the MVA by the time that this is built or shortly after, or it's possible that that might not be included in the future while we want to build these. So contrasting what it looks like with signalized intersection, how it feels for people walking and rolling as they cross. Also from an accessibility perspective, I'll be curious to discuss that at the end, but we would be looking at a signalized intersection or a roundabout at each of the ones on the screen here. So Eisner and Carver, and the intersection of Spring and Portland Estates. We've also shown some RA5 crosswalks. We could also consider half signals at these locations. So this is the one that exists right now at Jersey Street. We'd be installing an island, a traffic island, refuge island, so that folks could cross in 2 stages and have a bit of a safety piece. We've also shown one at Settle, and we could introduce more along the corridor as a grid network is built out into the adjacent neighborhoods. Here is a cross section of what that scenario 1 reallocated could look like. So there's 1 lane for vehicles, 1 lane for buses in each direction, reversing turn lane. In terms of active transportation, we have on the left-hand side our minimum AT dimensions. This is for where it's very constrained. We would want at minimum a 1 meter boulevard, an 8 meter cycle track, managed by a sort of a vertical grade separation with a 1.8 meter sidewalk as our minimum. That's where, or if we don't want to acquire additional property through a pinch point, the ideal that we're shooting for is to provide a 2.5 meter grassy boulevard that allows for adequate soil volume to grow up these big street trees, to provide a lot more shade canopy and improve the comfort of the walking and cycling facilities adjacent to it. We would aim for a 2 meter cycle track and a 2.5 meter sidewalk wherever possible. This is the expanded cross section that shows 2 vehicle lanes in each direction. It does look quite wide. One thing to consider when you are a pedestrian, you are crossing 7 lanes of traffic. So I've just flashed to the cross section. You can see a curbside transit lane, 2 vehicle lanes in each direction, a center reversible turning lane, and again on the flip side. So it would be expanding the right-of-way significantly, which for walking and cycling could have implications of kind of how exposed you are and the comfort of making that crossing. Again, this cross-section shows the minimum AT and the desirable. That's something that we would need to iron out in kind of the 30% design, and as we go to acquire property, if necessary, we could see what is possible for these facilities on either side. So this is a rendering, sort of an animated image of what the reallocated versus the expanded cross sections could look like. On the left-hand side is the reallocated. It shows the intersection of Portland at Eisner. And on the right-hand side is the expanded, also at the same intersection. So you can see what that 7-lane crossing, if you could see my cursor here, could feel like as a pedestrian on that kind of western leg. There are some opportunities to provide refuge islands to cut that up, but on the whole, you are crossing longer. With the reallocated scenario, there's less property acquisition requirements. It's a little bit faster for us to build. The expanded cross section does require getting a strip of property on one or both sides, so that could have implications for how quickly we're able to install these transit lanes. And also associated with that is cost. So not only would we need to build additional infrastructure, we would need to pay money to acquire this additional property for what could be a few meters of additional land for 2 kilometers of the stretch to be able to add these transit lanes. So here's a quick evaluation. We can you can reference all of this information online, but really what we found was that the roundabouts weren't quite as good for walking and cycling. The scenario 1 reallocated, where it's the narrower cross section, seemed to function the best for walking and rolling and cycling. And we can dig into that more. But I'll continue on to this next section, which is Portland Hills Terminal to Bissett. Where there aren't bus rapid transit lanes proposed east of Portland Hills Terminal, we were working within the existing 4-lane cross section and just looking at treatments at intersections to see how that impacted comfort and safety. Also making sure that we're expanding and extending our protected unidirectional bike lanes along this section. And we're doing this rather than narrowing it down as one of the scenarios in order to potentially future-proof if the Cole Harbour community does build up in the future and we decide that the BRT Red Line should be expanded, we'll have the right-of-way available to be able to make that decision in the future. But yeah, looking at wide sidewalks, tree boulevards, and unidirectional bike lanes. So the scenario 1 includes mixed traffic with roundabouts. Again, trying to mimic the North Park 2-lane roundabouts as much as possible, but the pedestrian and cycling path does divert around to do the two-stage crossing at each leg of the roundabout at more of a yield style. There's a possibility for us to install RRFB, so they're rectangular rapid flashing beacons, to help draw attention to the fact that someone's trying to cross there, build comfort as well, but it would still be a roundabout style crossing. And it would be connecting into future facilities on the east side of Caldwell Road, extending that MUP down into the community, as well as the existing multi-use pathway that's built on Forest Hills and Cumberland. So there is already a decent network of trails, and it would just be in Cole Harbour, it would just be connecting it into the main drag and some of the destinations that would be located along this this stretch of property. This is what scenario 1 could look like, mixed traffic with the roundabouts. One thing that I hadn't mentioned is that with the roundabouts, we would be taking out the dual center turn left lane and instead putting a concrete median. That helps with access control and safety, so that people can't be making left-hand turns in and out of driveways and unsignalized intersections. So instead, if you wanted to go left, you would go to the roundabout, go all the way around and make your right-hand turn in. So there are some implications for travel distance, but the safety overall would improve, and we're able to remove that center left turn lane because the roundabout facilitates the U-turns for that. And then the scenario 2, mixed traffic with signals, that's very similar to what's out there today, but it would be just with the addition of protected unidirectional bike lanes. So we would be kind of taking where the sidewalk is now, shifting it out further, and putting the bike lane in between the boulevard and the place for people walking and rolling. And that is what it could look like. Here's a cross section. And yeah, very similar to what it looks like today, but we would keep the center reversing turn lane in that option. So there are some safety concerns with that, but we heard mixed feedback about roundabouts versus the signals. The signalized is better for people who are cycling, as well as walking, and the roundabouts are rated in this yellow good category. Overall, we really wanted to frame these full-length scenarios. So like the scenario 1 is meant to be kind of the most nimble, cost-effective, quickest to do. It benefits people walking and rolling by providing wide sidewalks, additional boulevards, improved pedestrian streetscape, and keeping it narrow. The scenario 2 is more costly and could take additional time to build. It requires significant additional infrastructure and acquiring a wide swath of property to achieve the additional infrastructure, and that takes time. In terms of people cycling, it is comparable. So both of them achieve the 6 kilometers of protected cycling lane. But with the pedestrians for this scenario 2 that is widened, we're increasing the crossing distance to 7 lanes instead of 4 or 5 lanes, which does have some implications for safety and comfort. Both of the options achieve a high level of transit priority for people taking transit. For driving, scenario 1 reduces the vehicle capacity, whereas scenario 2 is costly and more takes more time, but it maintains the existing driving capacity. Looking through the Halifax lens, the scenario 1 narrower cross section is the most sustainable. There are less carbon emissions from transportation, and we're incentivizing sustainable transportation modes. So where there is less capacity for vehicles, it really encourages people to get on those sustainable transportation modes, consider walking, rolling, and cycling rather than single occupancy car trips. And scenario 2 is less environmentally sustainable. Framing it all through the IMP Complete Streets hierarchy, putting people who walk, roll, and bike at the top and driving alone at the bottom, and transit in the middle. So looking at what this means for travel time, in scenario 1 and scenario 2, it could add between 2 and 6 minutes of additional travel time for vehicles. But the benefit is that we are able to cut transit travel time in half. So where it previously took between 15 and 20 minutes to get between Portland Hills Terminal and Alderney, it could cut down to 10, 11 minutes all day long. So it cuts the transit travel time in half. It achieves connected, continuous protected cycling facility for 6 kilometers of the 7-kilometer length, and improved pedestrian streetscape. So our question is whether or not those trade-offs for vehicles are worth the benefits for other modes. Another thing that I want to draw to the attention of the committee is the Shearwater Connector. So it's something that's been talked about for a few years previously. It's an alternative route that would connect Caldwell Road to the Circumferential Highway via Mount Hope Avenue, with another small arm up to Portland Estates Boulevard. So there's a potential, if this road is built in the future, for it to relieve some of the traffic pressure from Portland Street and serve as an alternative corridor for cars. If we look at Action 124 of the Integrated Mobility Plan, it says where the total corridor capacity is increased through the construction of a parallel road, like the Shearwater Connector, it gives us the direction to explore opportunities to give higher priority to active transportation and transit within that primary corridor. So it's saying if we build the Shearwater Connector, maybe that could serve as fuel for us to look at a narrower, more transit and AT focused cross section for Portland Street and Cole Harbour Road. A final piece is whether or not we look at median transit lanes. So a handful of cities across North America are looking at, rather than running transit alongside the curb, it's running them in the center of the street. So you have your pedestrians, your cars, and your buses in the middle. The stops would be at signalized intersections on floating median transit islands, but it helps to maintain the priority by minimizing interaction with cars, and it could eventually be converted into light rail in the future if needed. So this is what the cross section could look like at one of the intersections. The stops would be staggered on each side of the intersection to allow space for a left-hand turn lane in the opposing direction. But the property requirements for this are comparable, if not slightly less, than the expanded scenario. So if we go to acquire additional property, should we be looking at just doing these median transit lanes in the first place? The median transit are better for reliability, transit time, and priority. It enhances safety with fewer turning conflicts with traffic. If you are walking across the street, you will cross in a few different locations. There's multiple short crossings in order to get to those median transit islands. So that could be a pro or a con. The curbside transit is easy and quick to implement. There's less property requirements, but there are longer crossing distances, and you're mixing with right-hand turning cars. So in the scenarios that I showed you, all of the curbside transit is a right-hand turn except for buses, which does reduce the priority a little bit. So one thing that we could consider with this is whether we go right to building median transit lanes, or if we choose one of these alternatives of curbside as an interim while we prepare ourselves for that longer term vision of median transit. So the way that we're looking at comparing these scenarios, there's a lot of complex trade-offs, and it varies based on section. I have an image up here on the right that shows some of our evaluation criteria. We're balancing these trade-offs in terms of transit network and operations, pedestrian realm and accessibility, cyclist safety and connectivity, traffic and truck operations, road safety considerations, project cost and property implications, and social environmental impact. So those are just some of the pieces that feed into this. We're also including public input as part of that. So we will kind of layer that in as we decide how to move forward and which of these scenarios we select for 30% design. So lastly, here's our timeline. In the springtime, where we are right now, we're in that public and stakeholder engagement phase. We've hit 1,200 folks and are just writing our what we heard report that should be available online at the end of the month. we're going to take what we heard alongside this formalized evaluation to select which scenarios to move forward into functional design. We're going to take 2 of these scenarios to functional design and then finalize the report with our consultants. We'll use that to develop a staff report, which will then be brought to Regional Council via Transportation Standing Committee. And we're hoping that that will happen in late 2024, early 2025 with the new council. So I appreciate your time in listening to this today. I have a few kind of guiding questions to consider in your discussion, and I'm happy to jump back into any of the scenarios if anyone would like clarification. But I'm really interested from the committee if you have any feedback on a particular section or approach that I've talked about today, which trade-offs are most important, what features should we most pay attention to in our 30% design phase from the perspective of walking, rolling, and cycling? And do you have any feedback from an accessibility perspective on roundabouts, path separation, or median transit islands? I can leave this up on the screen. Does construction of the Shearwater Connector impact your view of how we allocate space on Portland Street? And what sort of travel time impacts for people driving are worth the additional benefits for walking, rolling, cycling, and taking transit?
Thank you very much, Siobhan. That's a lot.
It's comprehensive, and I apologize for the
Yeah.
amount of time, but I'm curious to get your perspective.
Just before we go to questions and comments from the committee, because I imagine some committee members may have quite a few comments and questions, will they be able to contact you directly, or is there a link that they can go to for their comments?
Yeah, so we have all of the engagement material online at that Shape Your City Halifax link, but the survey has closed already, so that wouldn't be available for feedback anymore. If you have specific thoughts or you'd like to provide input beyond what we discuss in the session today, you can feel free to reach out to me by email. I can also put my phone number, or if you want to arrange a quick conversation, I can make myself available to do so. And we'll be sure that the feedback that we hear tonight is reflected in the What We Heard report as well.
Very good, thank you. So we will go to the speaking list and ask people for their comments and questions. Just to remind everyone, you can speak for 5 minutes for the first time on an agenda item. And once everyone has gone through that, you can follow with 3 minutes in a second round. So I'll start with Miles McCormick. Miles?
Yes, thank you very much. Very appreciate the presentation, Siobhan. I was intrigued with the median transit lanes, which is something that I make use of when I'm up into Richmond Hill area in Toronto. So I watch all aspects of that, from biking, running, accessibility. So that was well covered, and that would be something of strong interest. But for me, growing up in the old part of Dartmouth, I'm really appreciative of the attention to the heritage area from around Gaston Road, more going down into the Five Corners there. So with the scenario 1, I kept writing scenario 1 as we went our way through. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us. And again, I want to thank you. And taking a look at the cycling around Erskine Street, I think that that there's no easy way around that. Except that hill there. So when I looked at the totals for transit, I was also quite pleased to see what we've got. So quite exciting, and I appreciate the work that you and the team have been doing. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Miles. I don't know if you have, I guess a response isn't necessary for that. Brittany McLean, I couldn't make the meeting. Is Annika Ropel at the meeting?
Yeah, I'm here. I know that we've provided feedback on this already, but I did just want to note that I think it's really interesting that the scenario 2 options that are more expensive often are the ones that are actually accommodating, maintaining the level of vehicle trips versus the movement of people. And so it's really nice to see that prioritization specifically of transit through this area. I think also perhaps important to highlight the park and ride options for people who are coming into town from Mosquodobbit, Porters Lake, and beyond, that they can park and then hop on transit through that area. That seems yeah, I just think it's like an interesting thing because oftentimes in our work we hear a lot about how bikes and walking is what is costing people money, but really in this scenario, it's maintaining our car levels. And if we actually want to move, we need to make the other ones more attractive. So just a observation. I just noting the seasonal transit out to the beaches. That's definitely something we hear a lot about from an accessibility standpoint of if you don't own a car, it's really hard to get to some of our beaches in the province. And so noting that, you know, if we had a well-running bus that went to Rainbow Haven Beach, maybe we wouldn't have as much seasonal traffic trying to get there. And I'm really sorry, the very first section where we were looking at having the buses starting versus having a full bus transit, which involved purchasing more stuff. I wonder if there's also a world where we start with scenario one, and if there's a need, then we could add that piece in. And as well, that I imagine that those bus lanes would also be allowable for bikes to ride in the way other bus lanes are for people who feel comfortable riding in traffic. But I think that that's kind of useful to note that for more hardcore cyclists that those bus lanes also do serve as unprotected avenues. I think I'm just gonna leave it there. I don't love roundabouts, but I recognize that they have a role to play. I just feel like they become really dangerous for bikes and pedestrians. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you. So much work. Thanks.
Thank you, Annika. Elizabeth Pugh.
Sorry, delayed clicking here.
Okay.
I've actually already been part of the engagement with our department a few weeks ago, so I think any comments that I had I've probably already given, but I still really like the idea of the median bus lanes. If that is your end goal, my 2 cents would be, let's do it right the first time rather than starting something with the potential to do it later, because later can get really stretched out. And that 7-lane cross section with a turning lane in the middle, that just sends shivers down my spine for a lot of reasons. Trying to cross 3 lanes of traffic when you're making a left turn, I think, not to mention the whole, you know, what it does to pedestrians to try and cross and stuff. So not a big fan of that one. Anyway, thank you very much, though. I think there's a lot here. Like I said, I've heard it twice now, and I'm still, you know, not getting even scratching the surface, I think, of what this really means. So great work.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Douglas Wetmore.
Yes, I'll make it quick from me. First of all, I just wanted to give my comments on the bike network rerouting along Summit Street. I think that's a pretty reasonable solution given the space that we're working with along that first section of Portland Street. It feels like the top priority for most of this project is public transit, and I am fully okay with that, fully supportive of it. Glad to see that cycling infrastructure is still being considered where this space allocates it. I remember there was mention between either having it go down Old Ferry Road or to Summit. I would love to see both of those happen. I think those would both be valuable connections as opposed to picking one or the other. I did not have any other big comments up until you said middle of the road bus lanes with the possibility of going to light rail. I'm going to be thinking about that until I see it happen. I'll end it there. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you, Douglas. Milena Casanavicius.
Hi, Siobhan. Long time no see.
Hi, Melinda.
Well, to be very honest, this was extremely mind-boggling. That's a lot of information in, 45 minutes to an hour of a presentation. It's hard for me to comment on certain sections, but I did write down a few quick notes just as comments. And you and I have danced before. Number one, I genuinely feel that 1,200 people responding is not enough. I wish that sometimes that these Shape Your City things are announced, as I've said over and over again, more on the radio, advertise a little bit more, because the people who are in the know of what is happening will respond. For projects such as this, 1,200 people, I think that's what I heard you say. Correct
Yep.
me if I'm wrong. I really strongly feel it's not enough opinion. As I've been urging, and you have done this with myself as well, Phil Nickerson is, really appreciating his efforts. All this paperwork, draft designs are great. I encourage planners and HRM to do on-the-ground evaluations with tactile maps. That means bring the communities out to where this is going to happen, because engineers, designers actually don't understand from the accessibility point of view to this day for me that, what is actually going to happen if you are someone such as myself who's blind or partially sighted, a wheelchair user, with a walker, deaf or hard of hearing, et cetera, et cetera. And it opens up the minds of everyone there. So before anything goes any further, rather than just online meetings, and this takes time, but it's better, as Elizabeth had said, that we do this right and not have to go back to reevaluate. Just a few more little comments. I agree, 7 lanes. I think all my female genitalia dropped to the ground. No way, no how. I don't want to be crossing 7 lanes, and I never will. I will let you know that doing some onboarding and intaking for CNIB. We have a lot of new Canadians from Sudan, Nigeria, Syria, Ukraine, you name it, it's there, who are blind or partially sighted. There's no way anybody's going to be using that. And if we want to make pedestrians feel safe, that won't be it. Which also brings me to the roundabouts. You and I have discussed roundabouts before from the blind or partially sighted perspective. Again, that North Park one, the traffic is going in all directions. It is extremely hard to, difficult to decide when it is safe to cross, because you have cars coming from all sides of your head when you cannot see. So I strongly opt out of the roundabouts. If there is no other alternative, then I guess it has to happen, but not from the blind or partially sighted perspective. And what I've heard you say a lot, actually, Siobhan, and I hope we kind of stop in these presentations is, I think I've heard you, there's safety concerns in just about every presentation. I don't like hearing that. I don't like hearing that safety concerns, and I don't like hearing extra cost either. If it's going to be extra cost to ensure that there's safety for all, first and foremost, pedestrians, all pedestrians, okay, that we find that money and we spend that money and we get that money, because there's no point in building this when accident's going to happen and it's not going to be used. And from the walkability perspective, right, I strongly believe that we have to keep our pedestrians and our cycling community, as I cycle as well, on my tandem. I keep repeating this, that, we are the people on the road that need that protection. And last but not least, the medium transit. We can. I wouldn't mind having a conversation with you. I don't feel comfortable with those. Having grown up in Alberta and Calgary, actually, the light rail transit, if that ever happens here, and I wish it was happening here, they all have overpasses to get to the light rail transit, to be crossing again lanes and then catching a bus in the middle of the road. It's a scary situation. So, again, we're going to be concerned with the crossing and how do you get there, and et cetera, et cetera. It would be nice if we could just move to light rail transit directly, but I know where we're living and where that's going to go. So that's all the comments. I applaud you. This was one heck of a achievement. And So if you've written down my points, I would like to have a offline conversation at some point, just to point out a few more accessibility things. Thank you. End of thought.
Thank you, Milena. Those were all very useful. Glenn Babcock. Glenn?
Thank you. First of all, I was late, which is too bad because I missed most of the presentation. Well, I missed all of the presentation. Living in Porters Lake, we spend a fair bit of time in Cole Harbour. Most of the things that we do, a lot of our shopping, a lot of our services are located along Portland Street, so I'm really interested in the presentation. And so again, it's too bad that I missed it. I kind of like Miles, I guess. I lived in Richmond Hill for 20 years and watched them build the Viva rapid transit system there, and it was pretty scary to a certain extent, being visually impaired and looking at all those center lanes and catching the bus in the middle of the road, that sort of thing. But it was relatively easy to adapt to it once it was finally in place. You really just have to wait for the cross signal to get out to your island to catch your bus. My big worry about it, because I've seen this happen in Toronto, especially those lanes that are located near schools, is that the kids don't often wait for the lights to run out and catch their bus in the middle of the road. It does scare me hearing that there could be a roundabout as part of this plan, but I'm going to have to go back to the plan and look at it and see where it would be located. So really, beyond what I've already said, it would be irresponsible of me to comment on the plan that I haven't really studied yet. So I will wrap up with that, and I will go back and study the plan.
Thank you, Glenn. Just to remind everyone, since this is being recorded and available on YouTube, you'll be able to see the presentation at your leisure anyway. Okay. So Councillor Cuttle has just on the chat has shown that she is not able to join us right now. Let's just see. Councillor Cuttle, are you able to join? No. Okay, we'll move on to Peter Zimmer.
Hey, Siobhan, thank you very much for the presentation and all the work that's gone into it. My reading in safety and looking at what has been done elsewhere leads me to ask you a fundamental question. In designing the roads, you've accepted like 3.3 meter or 4 meter wide roads as a basis. And I realize it's not in the authority of Halifax alone to do it, but if you were designing for road speeds that were, instead of 50 kilometers an hour as the dense standard, and maybe dropping it to, no more than 40 on Portland Street, you can make the roadways, the lanes, narrower, because the speed doesn't demand that much. So if we were to go and say, let's drop all the speed limits, preferably all over Nova Scotia all at once, by 20% or maybe more at the lower speeds, you could fit a lot more space for bicycles and pedestrians. Another observation about lane widths is, and I know in many jurisdictions, they're having increasing problems with people who are using cargo bikes and having space in the lanes for them to pass each other. And it gets really compounded when you have cargo bikes sharing a mixed use pathway. Not good stuff. Maximum separation for all of these kinds of things. I have been a trishaw driver for Cycling Without Age. They're a full meter wide. Two of them passing, or one of them trying to make a right angle turn in the little green boxes, is a real hard thing to do. And if, it's a question of safety. If we drop the speeds, every single collision is going to be less likely to kill. It's less likely to seriously injure. It's also going to, in dropping those speeds and adding a few minutes for a commute time, really going to save the drivers all sorts of money. If you're driving at 30 or 40 along the Bedford Highway, instead of sometimes racing up to 65 or 70 and then having to slow down because you run into the traffic jam or you run into the traffic light or whatever, but if you just cruise along at the lower speeds, your gas bill is going to drop. They're a winner there. I mean, the province might lose a little bit of gas tax, as would the Irving company. But I really think we need to bring up a slower environment as a better environment. It's been found to work in Barcelona, in Paris, in Edmonton. You know, it's got great benefits. And at least in the design stage where you're playing with alternatives, I really would encourage you to make a third alternative saying, what if we reimagine these with narrower lanes that would operate optimally at slower speeds? I think I'll say that as my main rant at this moment.
Any response there, Siobhan?
No, I appreciate that, Peter. And it's definitely something that we're aware of and can continue to push in the 30% design. I think you can do a narrower lane on the inside lane when it's not close to a curb. We're also thinking we need to hit a certain lane width to allow for buses, but we're squeezing it down as much as possible. And I think if we are to go below that, we will need to get variance approval from some folks at HRM, including the Municipal Design Authority, but it's something that we can continue to keep top of mind as we move into this next phase.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to Holly Woodill.
I appreciate that this is a lot of hard compromises being made. I love.
Excuse me, Holly. Can you turn your volume up?
Sure, I can try. I love that there's a lot of community walking involved with the good sidewalks. I appreciate the bicycle lanes, although my days of doing that may be over. And I love the transit options. Can you hear me now? Okay. The issues that come to my mind is that there's a lot of development that's coming from Portland Coal Harbor Road towards the Atlantic Ocean, the eastern side, and like Morris Lake starts quite close to Portland Street or Coal Harbor Road and goes all the way past Caldwell at Hines. And there's this, I see this system as helping those new developments get around, and hopefully better connections will continue down the road. And I reiterate just about everybody else's comments so far. So that condenses I love being last. Thank you. But yes, thank you very much. That was this is a tough job. Don't like rotaries as a pedestrian, but I like them as driver. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Paul Young.
Okay, then there's really the last. Okay, so I have a couple of comments. Excuse me, 4 comments, and I'll probably use my 5 minutes. And they're largely about priority. I recognize it was an awful lot of detail and an awful lot of work in this project and a lot of balancing. I get that. But I want to talk about priorities. So when we're talking about, there was a slide where you're talking about the density and the number of people that could use a given lane, and you went from cars to bikes to walking to buses and dedicated buses. And I want to talk about that because I want to encourage the city to make it a massive priority to have dedicated bus lanes that have control over the lights, that don't have to stop, that buses or, I don't believe we're ever going to see rapid transit here. It's too darn hilly. But at least dedicated buses that are not waiting for lights. And that becomes a better alternative than a car because you're getting there faster. So it's important to not just point out that they have the space, they have the priority. And that is an advantage to active transportation because it gets fewer cars on the road, fewer people on the road, and alternatives. And often there's a rack and roll dealio where you can put your bike or whatever walking on that active transportation. So it's extremely on the bus. So it's extremely important to make that a number one priority. I can't say that strong enough. The second point that I have is that I find it's a bit painful to watch shoehorning. And it's the same thing I said last month. I'm sorry, but we're shoehorning infrastructure into a very dense area. And it's expensive. It's never going to be safe, and it's never going to be desirable. You're never going to get kids on bikes like moms and tots riding along heavy traffic roads. At least they certainly won't enjoy it. What I would suggest is something to think about is consider like a backbone, like a Dartmouth has, has the harbor path, which is excellent because it doesn't have to stop much. It goes a fairly good distance and have spokes coming off of that. So build a dedicated, in the same sort of way that I'm talking about a dedicated bike route, you want to have bus routes. You want to have dedicated bike routes that have spokes that take you to useful places, schools and businesses and such. And the backbone is safe, comfortable, and efficient, and a place where mom and tots would be comfortable, as well as those hardened cyclists and people walking. People will go farther if they're safe and comfortable. And that's true for transit. It's true for cyclists. So the next point I have is I'm just going to add the pile on roundabouts. Roundabouts are great for traffic. I get why they're great for traffic, but they're exactly the opposite to what active transportation wants because it keeps traffic moving. And even worse than that is it has drivers turning their heads left to look for when they can go ahead and not right where the people are. So there's nothing more dangerous than a roundabout, whether you're walking, whether you're riding your bike on the sidewalks, or whether you're riding your bike through the roundabouts. Roundabouts are really, really problematic. I've never seen a good one. The worst ones have 2 lanes going through them. At least if there's one, there's less to look for. But let me tell you, they're terrible, just terrible. The last thing I have to say is again, it's about priority. Perception of safety is the most important thing in designing active infrastructure that supports active transportation. If people don't feel safe, you walk along those busy roads and it's horrible. You come to that 7 lanes where you have to cross. It's horrible. You come to a roundabout. You have to think about this. So, and the more times you have to stop, the more driveways you have to cross, it gets to be a real problem. If you want to have a dedicated bus route for mass transit, and as much as possible, you want to have dedicated nonstop bike routes as well with spokes that are going to take you to where you need to go. I'll stop there. I hope that's helpful. I know that's not direct to what you showed us, but it's more kind of an overall picture. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. You are actually just a little over your 5 minutes, but well, that's good. All good points. Did Councillor Cottle join us? No. I have a few comments myself, although I did actually respond to the online survey as a private citizen, but I have a few comments. And in terms of active transportation, it seems clear to me that scenario 1 is always going to be the better option rather than scenario 2. And roundabouts will also not be a good option for active transportation. So I'm echoing what many other people have said. The issue about reserving a central lane for an LRT, a light rail, it's a great idea, but it's going to be a long time coming. And also, it may not be necessary in the sense that if the Shearwater connector is built, and I have a feeling that that is likely to be built eventually, that will relieve a lot of traffic on Portland Street, and which means that basically scenario 1 can accommodate the amount of traffic quite easily, it seems to me. It will be able to accommodate it, and scenario 2 won't really be necessary anyway. One just minor item, I always prefer to keep pedestrians separate from cyclists whenever possible. And you've done that in most of your scenarios. However, at Portland and Baker Drive, there is a short MUP link proposed that will take people into the Portland Lakes Greenway, and I'd rather see that being separate as both a separate greenway and a separate protected bicycle route. It's just a minor thing, but it would be nice. Finally, I really like the fact that both scenarios have a new pedestrian and bike bridge over the circumferential highway. That is a terrible place right now for either pedestrians or cyclists, and I've gone through it many times as a cyclist. In the winter, the snow piles up on the very narrow sidewalk. So it'll be costly. I'm assuming the province will substantially contribute to the financial cost because, after all, we're talking about a provincial highway. So my congratulations. I'll look forward to that new link. Those are my comments. Now, does anyone want to go to a second round? If so, could you put your hand up? And okay, I see Paul Young with his hand up and Peter Zimmer. So I think I saw Paul first. So Paul, you have 3 minutes if you need it.
I'm going to take 1 minute. I just want to say quickly that with electric vehicles coming, they're wider and bigger, and they take up more space on the road. That's what's happening now. Maybe in the future they won't, but that's something that's worth kind of planning for. It's just a small thing, but I just wanted to, it goes with Peter's comment about making the road narrower. Just wanted to share that. That's all.
Okay, thank you. And Peter, you had your hand up as well, I believe.
Yep. Just very much echoing Paul's comments about fear. I mean, fear is what keeps my wife from riding her bike. Well, she hasn't had it out this year yet. The potential for an accident, I think, in terms of driving people away from active transportation active trip options, is vastly underestimated by the cops, by the people who are counting traffic accidents, by the engineers who are saying, what's a high-risk corner? Because there have been 3 crashes there that killed somebody in the last decade. I'm sorry, a crash that didn't happen but scared the out of somebody is going to make them not willing to take the risk. We have to de-risk at a perceptual level so people are comfortable. So yes, separation of bikes and rollerblades and whatever from pedestrians, very important. But The ones that kill are cars. I mean, cars are the things that we fear when we're on the roads, whether we're a pedestrian, whether we're crippled, whether we're in a wheelchair, whatever. So that needs to be the really high count. And it should be pushed very hard by Siobhan and all the rest of the designers and planners to say, we got to de-fear the road for vulnerable road users.
Okay, thank you. Holly, you have your hand up too?
Sorry, just to that point, if we go back to the 7 solutions to saving the green belt, the various plans to the current one now, if we connected communities with bike routes, walking routes, trails, all through the metro, you wouldn't have to worry about having a bike route on a street for too long. And that's all I have to say about that. It's safer and you save the environment.
Okay. Councillor Cottle, did you have any questions or comments? Oh, okay, you have your sound off. Your sound is off. Okay. Okay. Thank you again, Siobhan. I hope you found all of our various comments useful, and we look forward to seeing the report once it's made.
Certainly. Do you mind if I chime in with some final comments? Or
okay.
who was that just
Councillor
unmuted?
Cottle, are you?
Is it working now?
Yes, it is. Okay.
Yay. Okay. Sorry, that was a big workaround. Yeah, no, I just want to quickly say that I appreciate all the feedback that has been given. This, like, you know, this is it is a process. It's a long process. You know, tremendous amount of work has gone into it. I think, you know, the points around safety, I mean, both perceived and real are quite valid. You know, I think one of the, I haven't heard that term before, shoehorning, that this is being shoehorned in. And it is true that most of our city has been built out, and I experienced this problem in many places, in that, you know, if we were to start from scratch, we would lay in our infrastructure and then we would build around our infrastructure. You know, given the way our city's developed over the last few hundred years, that's not the position we're finding ourselves in now. So, you know, to Siobhan and everybody else who's worked on this, you know, there are compromises, but overall, I mean, it's kind of exciting to see that we're actually working on a project of this magnitude, and you know, it is a game changer. One thing that I'm kind of aware of more now than I have been in the past is that not everything can be for everyone, and the important part is ensuring that where, you know, one piece might not be, you know, the ideal scenario for pedestrians, that there are viable options and choices made, and, you know, where it's not ideal for pedestrians won't be in the heart of a place where there's a high pedestrian count. So things like the bridges become important, and other means of trying to circumnavigate those points, or to you know, put in safety measures. I mean, it's a massive challenge. To Paul's points, yeah, I would love to have a totally separate spine with folks coming off of it. You know, recently in Calgary, and they have a tremendous amount of, you know, separated bike lane. But I also appreciate that's difficult. And so, you know, the feedback is great. I think we just, you know, keep pushing forward, try to mitigate the issues where we can to the best, you know, to the best we can, because, you know, the pedestrian and cycling safety is paramount. But I just appreciate the hard work. As for Richmond Hill, I was up there recently too, and the bike lanes in that scenario are kind of terrifying. They're not protected bike lanes. They're just basically painted bike lanes with the transit islands in the middle. In fact, I think they're some of the scariest bike lanes I've ever seen. Were the ones in Richmond Hill. So, I think we're doing a better job in some aspects, and that should be, noted. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And again, thank you, Siobhan, and I hope you found this a useful discussion.
Yes,
So
definitely.
okay.
Do you mind if I close just with some comments? I really appreciate everybody's time and me taking that chunk to walk you through the project. It's a lot to absorb. So if you take some time, you have some thoughts that come to you later, or you want to talk through any particular elements, I have kind of Milena and Glenn written down as potential follow-ups, but reach out by email, or we can organize a phone call and talk through any of the comments, because I really am interested in capturing your perspectives and making sure that we get the best 30% design we can with this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So let's move on to item 9.1.2, which is an update from the Active Transportation Group. And David McIsaac, are you here, David?
I'm here. You hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
So look, I might just do a really abbreviated report tonight, because Laura's here from the clerk's office, and I think I might kind of just, anyway, I'm going to shut up now so I can keep to my point. The main thing I just wanted to let everybody know is that public engagement is open right now for a functional planning project that's called the Alderney Drive Transit and Active Transportation Planning Project. From an active transportation perspective, it's about sort of making the connection for people biking and walking. There's a lot of walking parts to this one. From the corner of kind of Wise Road and Thistle, kind of where the Zatzman Sportsplex is, between there and Alderney Landing. And there's 3 kind of concept options. There's a Shape Your City webpage that has those. We had engagement last night. There's going to be engagement at the Sportsplex on Monday night. And then also kind of a pop-up in Alderney Landing, I think next Thursday. Anyway, it's all on the Shape Your City website. And just encourage folks to participate and get the word out to your network. It's super important in the AAA network for a connection. We have to kind of make a connection between downtown Dartmouth and the Bridgehead. It's super important for the Trans-Canada Trail. It's a key kind of connection for that, and probably Blue Route too, Elizabeth. So I just kind of look for folks to get as involved as possible in that. There's 3 very distinct options, and I think there's some interesting choices there. And I'm going to leave it at that, just to kind of give Laura a bit of time.
Okay. If anyone has any questions for David right now, perhaps you can put your hand up. No, I don't see anyone with hand up. So thank you, David. And we'll move on to the added items. Now, I wasn't here at the start of the meeting. So, Douglas, did we actually add the governance review and Milena's Almond Street item?
I believe we added Milena's, but I believe Peter's conversation was already part of the agenda. I don't think that had to be added. I could be wrong about that, though.
Okay. But Laura Lewis is here from the deputy clerk's office.
Yes, I'm here. I have a couple slides if that would help, but I'll try and be brief.
Okay, so yes, please go ahead, Laura.
Okay, so I'll just take a minute and get the PowerPoint up here. Hopefully everyone can see that.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yes, my name is Laura Lewis. I am the Deputy Clerk of Council and Committee Services with the Clerk's Office, and just here today to provide an overview of some governance committee work that we are doing. So staff were directed to, we're calling it the Governance Review Project now, but we were directed by Council to take a look at this work in June 20th of 2023. We're really focusing on it as a large holistic governance review. Sort of the last governance review that staff undertook with council was between 2009 and 2013. The main outcome of that was the creation of the standing committees. So it's been a while, and at that time, you know, advisory boards and committees were not looked at. And it was really sort of specific to the implementation of standing committees. We are currently at phase 1, which council considered on July 9th and gave staff some direction, of which ATAC was included in. So that's why we're here today. But we also have 3 other phases after phase 1 is complete that we are looking at doing. Phase 2 will involve standing committees and some lived experience committees, perhaps some different meeting procedures for some committees of council. Step 3 looks at some guidelines and best practices when creating new committees, or even procedures for existing ones. One of the things we're looking at including in there is something like more regular review processes. And then 4 is the councillor appointment process. So phase 1 is what went to council on July 9th. Our approach to phase 1 was starting with an inventory analysis of, we call them the ABCs in this presentation, but our advisory boards and committees. It included engagement with HRM staff on the role and structure of ABCs, and that of course included, the staff liaisons that provide support to our boards and committees. There was a survey that went out to our current volunteers, and then 11 of our ABC boards and committees went through an evaluation. As part of this evaluation, we looked at the origin of committees, what has happened over time. We did an assessment of agendas, and we looked at high level at terms of reference, specifically on the mandate sections. So the recommendations for the 11 committees that were looked at in phase 1 fell into 2 categories. Review and amend terms of reference, of which that is where ATAC fell into, and others, staff brought forward a recommendation to council to commence the process to dissolve. Council did make one amendment to that section, so Northwest Planning Advisory Committee was removed from that process. High level, because I think this is future work that I think the committee is interested in, and we certainly understand that. So phase 1 high level looked at the current mandate of the Active Transportation Advisory Committee. One of the reasons we looked at it was, just seeing is that reflective of what the committee is doing? Is there anything there that doesn't take place anymore? Where would be if the committee continued, where would be things that, we would need to make some adjustments? So the current mandate is on the left, and then just some proposed amendments, just from the phase 1 high level look were highlighted. So that's over a couple slides there. And in general, it's fairly active. I think it's more like some minor adjustments to the proposed amendments. One of the things would be, reflecting the main activities and roles, connecting it with the plans that have been approved by council, in looking at some adjustments so that the mandate is reflective, it is accurate. That's important both for the existing committee, but also when we're recruiting new members, and also when working with business units to, ensure relevant projects are being brought forward to Active Transportation for review and comment. All that being said, I think the next most interested point probably for active transportation members is around what are the next steps now that council has given staff this direction. So we are currently the main focus coming out of the July 9th direction of council is we're working on the process which requires additional staff reports to formally dissolve the committees that direction has been given to their mandate has been reached or their work has concluded, to bring that back to council. After that, we are going to be looking at doing the staff reports to amend the terms of reference for Active Transportation Advisory Committee and Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee was the other committee included in that section. When as part of completing that work and proposing staff report and amendments, our intention would be to come back to active transportation with sort of here's a more fulsome review of terms of reference. We've spoken with business unit staff, come with some discussion questions and seek some consultation and feedback from committee formally at that point. We're looking at probably winter, spring 2025 for a return. So in the meantime, for active transportation following the governance review, it is really the current terms of reference and the status quo. But we know this is a large piece of work and lots of interest, which is great. We're excited for any feedback committee might have. If you have any this evening or any questions, we can also be available outside of meetings as well. So I'll stop sharing that, and I am here for questions, but I do know it's been a long meeting as well.
Thank you very much, Laura. Maybe I could just kick off because I have a couple of questions. I think you mentioned then that at some point you will be seeking opinions from committee members, and that's great. But I guess it's a question of when is that most appropriate? Currently, you're looking at the current terms of reference, and you've suggested those couple of those changes. But I know we have some committee members here who actually would like to expand the committee's work, and Peter Zimmer in particular was interested in that. So I guess I'm just wondering, it would be very difficult to get committee as a group to probably to agree on any particular change, but is that what you're looking for? Are you looking for the committee as a whole to come up with agreement?
I think what we would bring is sort of some discussion questions, some parameters as what might be identified with, depending on the direction HRM is looking at going with different plans where there might be the opportunity for valuable feedback or to get valuable consultation on different projects that are coming forward, and then sort of bringing that back to committee. There was also, I think it was in 2015, there was also consultation done with active transportation at that time. And I think engagement was done maybe with individual members as part of that. And also as the committee as a whole, looking at the terms of reference. And I think there was some expansion of mandate through that work in 2015. So we could look at different ways to consult with committee and committee members as part of the next staff report.
Okay. Why don't we, I'll just open it up. If any committee member has a question or concern, now would be the time to put your hand up. And
Hugh, it's Milena here. Just quickly to Laura. Thanks for coming here. But all the information you had just said, would that all be the same information that came through our emails? Because I received an email I haven't had a chance to go through thoroughly yet.
I'll have to check and maybe through Krista or allow me if I have an email from you specifically. I do have one from Greg Zimmer for sure, but I can make sure I get that.
No, sorry. My question was
Okay.
either yesterday or the day before, it came through HRM and all the governance, and there was links and that clearly states the committees that are being dismantled, for lack of a better word, and then in terms of reference, because everything you have said here seems to be what I read briefly in the email that came through.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, it would all be
Okay.
the same consistent information. Yeah, and that email
Okay.
went out today to all the active like volunteer members and of the active volunteer committees. Yeah.
Great, good. Thank you. And the thought. Thank you. That's
Okay,
it for me,
thank
Hugh.
you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question or comment for Laura? If so, raise your hand. Okay, I don't see anyone's hand up. So thank you very much for joining us, Laura, and we'll look forward to hearing from your group in due time. One other question I have, though, we currently report to the Transportation Standing Committee, and the only way, other than comments to staff, AT staff, the only way we can have a direct impact or substantial impact is by making a recommendation to the Transportation Standing Committee. Will that, is there any consideration of changing that, or will that stay the same?
I think in general, that would stay the same for sort of any advisory committee in terms of direction or comment or looking at directing staff to do for future work. That would be something that would have to go to the standing committee, and transportation is the most appropriate one right now.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you again, and we will move on to Milena's added item, which is item 10.1. Milena speaking with regard to the letter on the Almond Street cycling infrastructure. Milena?
Oh, okay, thank you. So we are past our time, so I will only say a few things. I don't want to keep this committee past our scheduled times. It's summer, everybody's busy. Basically, the letter I felt I needed to share what has gone out via Walk and Roll, who I'm a part of, and CNIB, who I'm a part of, concerning infrastructure on the bike lanes that are being built today. Let me make this very, very clear. I are not against bike lanes in any shape or form. It is the design of raised bike lanes, particularly that go across a crosswalk, which is forming extremely dangerous situations, given the nature of what the design is going, that are being followed as guidelines. So basically, if you read the letter, what we're asking is a moratorium. And I myself will be going to Transportation Standing Committee in August to bring this point forth, so we can leave this discussion for later. But I'm feeling that sometimes things are going, working kind of in silos. This is a committee, we're kind of missing little bits and pieces. So basically, I just wanted to share that letter, what has gone out. I will be at Transportation Standing Committee come in August, representing myself, Walk and Roll, and CNIB. And if you have any questions, feel free to email, I guess, because I really don't want to keep this committee here. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Milena. And you're correct. We are over our time.
Yeah.
So
that's it. Yeah. Thank you. That's it.
So it remains for me to mention that the date of the next meeting, which is August 22nd, assuming that we have an agenda. And I'll call for a motion to adjourn from someone.
I'll move that.
Thank you, Councillor Cottle. I believe we don't require a seconder for that. So I'll say thank you to everyone. And again, my apologies for being late in joining.